Jean. Thanks for sitting down with me today and talking a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, it was nice talking to you and catching up just now as well. And I can't wait to kind of share a little bit of, I don't know, what I do and stuff about myself. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. I know. I can't wait to be able to actually see each other in person again. That's going to be nice.
Yeah,
But
when the pandemic's over.
I know we're not sure when that's going to happen, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. So I kind of just want to start by letting people know a little bit about who you are, what you do, what your journey has been. And I actually don't know a ton about kind of your backstory and your life story, your career story. I've known you for a couple of years, but we just never kind of went there. So I would love to know a little synopsis of how you got to where you are today.
Okay. So yeah, the times we have spoken, it's kind of just more about business and sharing stuff, which has been really helpful. And so just to give viewers an idea of Natalia as well, she's really dedicated and committed to the photographer community. And it's just been such a pleasure to kind of be a part of her photographer community on Facebook. So if you guys haven't joined, like you guys should join. Um,
Oh,
it is for females only though, so it might be awkward if you're a guy photographer listening in.
guys can be on the website and learn all they want, but yeah, the groups are for the females only.
Yeah, girls club. So a little bit about myself. So I came to America when I was about 3 or 4, and then kind of grew up in Delaware and then moved to SoCal. But my journey as a photographer has been kind of circuitous. I didn't actually think I was going to be a photographer. I didn't even have a camera until I was about 18 when I purchased it on my own and kind of just went traveling. And that's when I really fell in love with it. Before that, I really considered film a lot. That was kind of my big passion. I remember just like coming home from high school and middle school, and then the first thing I do is turn on HBO because that was like the short amount of time that my parents weren't like hovering over me, like, oh, are you studying? Are you like, trying to get into college, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I fell in love with film noir. I watched a lot of Turner Classic movies. HBO Citizen Kane was one of my favorite movies. Still is today. And then Sunset Boulevard also kind of really struck a chord with me. And so when I picked up my camera, it just felt really natural because like, oh, I'm kind of being a filmmaker, right? Like I'm able to document what's around me and then bring it back home to the people I care about and show them all these cool things when I'm traveling abroad. And so I've kind of continued that just even until now. Whenever I go traveling, I just absolutely love kind of getting my creative juices going and then just wanting to inspire people with what I see. But yeah, I mean, it was really just how did my passion develop? And then when I realized that, this could be a feasible business, I worked with a photographer down in LA called Benny Chan, and he was really successful, and he kind of showed me that this is something where you can merge your passion and still like make a living from it. And so it kind of really inspired me, and that's why I'm here today doing it and really trying to hustle every day.
What the photographer that you worked with down in LA, Benny Chan, you said?
Yeah,
Did he do architectural work or commercial? Like what kind of work did he do?
he did architectural and mainly commercial buildings, institutional stuff. I mean, like I remember assisting him on a shoot for YouTube, and yeah, just large scale architecture. He didn't really do residences, but yeah.
Cool.
Why
And
am I doing residences? Because it's there's less equipment required, and I really love the scale of it. I mean, it's really intimate. You get to work one-on-one with the designer, and I think it's just as creative.
yeah,
But yeah.
I love the intimacy of doing residential too. I think that's what keeps kind of pulling me back to it.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to shoot architecture though. Don't get me wrong.
Well, you're shooting architecture. You're just shooting it. Um, you're shooting residential architecture on the inside. You're just
Yeah.
not shooting commercial or civic or anything like that. But it's still architecture. It's still buildings and designs.
Yeah, no. I'm shooting that large scale architecture kind of just on my own during travel. So
Hmm.
I don't know. Hopefully one day someone hires me for that too. Like pretty consistently. I've only done a few here and there.
Yeah. I'm going to circle back to your travel stuff because you
Okay.
do quite a bit of it, and I love the travel stuff you share. But so you mentioned film, and I saw that you have a degree in mathematics, which I totally did not expect, but can kind of see from your work how that sort of almost analytical kind of view kind of plays into it. But did I see you also got a degree in theater as well? Was it dual? Or you?
Minor in theater. So about the film thing, I pretty much took every single film class available to a non-major and theater class. uh, just I just like the whole process. I mean, it's so creative, and they really say that acting is the shy man's revenge. And I was always more of an introvert,
Mhm.
um, and so yeah, that's definitely kind of helped me break out of my shell. And I thought the theater classes were probably the more important ones in my life. But for the math part, it wasn't like I had a passion for math. It was just more like, my parents are really worried that, I'm not going to succeed as an artist, because I think that coming from a Chinese background, especially, it's just not something that, is normal for kids to go into. I mean, I can empathize because I know the story of my parents. I know what they went through back in China. I mean, they lived through the Cultural Revolution. Like people,
Mm.
like there were deaths. Like it was pretty bad. I mean, they Mao was pretty stringent on his policies against artwork. So they burned artwork. They tortured artists. They, like I heard a story when I was a kid about how there was a violinist in my mom's apartment building, and because she was a violinist, they decided to hang her from a tree, like with her fingers, until her fingers broke and she couldn't, like, yeah, it was really sad. So I'm really happy my parents kind of took me out of that. But I also, like, when I think about things that have to do with like culture or like Chinese culture, like holding me back or whatnot, I don't really think about it that way. It did definitely kind of sidetrack me into mathematics, to answer your question. But at the same time, I can empathize, like when you grow up around that kind of like thinking, it's
Yeah.
hard to break out of that. And to have like come out of that to bring your kids to a country of opportunity,
Mhm.
to hope that they can like become more successful and become a doctor or a lawyer or a business person, and they're like, oh, I want to be an artist. It's kind of just like, whoa, okay, I like moved to a foreign country, did not understand the language, could not see my family for years at a time, and you want to like risk everything I did, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think,
um, you started talking about the influence of your Chinese background, which was going
yeah,
to be a question. You spoke about it so beautifully. I can totally see how your parents would have sort of these fears about the artist life sort of ingrained in them after being in a culture like that. That totally makes sense. And yeah, after making such a big sacrifice to move here and go through so much, and then to see one of their kids want to go into something that they're so afraid is gonna
like ruin them.
backfire, or yeah, take two steps back. So that makes total sense. Um, have you found your math background to play a role in your business or your photography at all? Like,
Yeah,
how has that played?
that's harder to answer.
Is
Um, okay, I think we're breaking up a bit, but that's harder to answer because I think as an artist, you're never trying to trying to describe what you're doing. It's more just like, for me, I believe that for art to happen, you kind of have to just do things organically and let people interpret what they may out of it. I do think that, what I really love in photography is strong composition,
Mhm.
things that are a bit more abstract. And so maybe that comes from mathematical thinking. I'm not sure. I really don't know.
Yeah, I know it's kind of it's kind of an intangible to try to put into words, but
Yeah.
I feel like there's definitely a technical eye in your work. So maybe that played into it. I don't know. Um, you also talk a lot about constructivism,
Yeah.
and how that really shapes your views of architecture and spaces. Um, I'd love for you to talk about that, about what constructivism is and
Okay.
how you see that kind of feeding into what you do.
Yeah. I think that for me, constructivism was something I kind of just happened to read upon one day, and it really was something that I resonated with. So I mean, it's a movement in art and philosophy and epistemology. But when I first read about it, it was more just about, a theory of how do we learn things. And um, so it's basically like we learn things by experiencing them and then reflecting on them. So there's like an accommodation and an assimilation process that happens with each new information that we're getting. We're trying to assimilate it into our framework. And so there are these like mental constructs that help us, I guess, like learn. And that's actually something that I always kind of resonated with, because that's how I learned, and that's how I kind of like shaped myself into who I am, kind
Mhm.
of see the world. I I don't really, I'm not one to just read something in a textbook and be like, oh, okay, cool, like that's so true, or just like read the news and like be like, oh yeah, that's 100% accurate. It's always kind of a process where it's like, I read it, I interpret it, and then I question it and I think about it, reflect on it. Um, with photography, I don't think that's something that you can learn in a school, really. I mean, it helps to be in that environment, but I think that with photography, it's something that you kind of just go out in the world, do, and then you bring it home on your gigantic monitor. You're staring at it for a really long time, like rating and culling, and then you're like fidgeting here and there, and then trying to reflect on like, oh shoot, like, maybe that lighting didn't work out that well. Like maybe I should have like stepped a little further back. And then you're constantly improving that way.
Mhm.
And so that's why I kind of chose the name. But then I also saw the artwork that came out of the constructivists. So like Malevich and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, like those are some of the people that I really love as artists. They're very abstract. And then it was just kind of coincidental. I'm like, it's meant to be. I should just name the business after this.
Yeah, nice. Um, I think that's a totally healthy way of looking at it too. Like it's so much better to take new information and process it through your own experiences and kind of question it. That's something that I think a lot of people need to be doing more of, is to take information and kind of process and question it and decide for themselves whether it's truth or not. Especially in today's world, I feel like
Yeah.
we done.
We were talking about masks earlier. I mean, it's like, virus that spreads through your mouth. Should we be wearing masks? Like,
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of information out there that isn't worth following, and so maybe a lot more people should read up on constructivism.
maybe.
um, that's awesome. I love that you have. I loved my philosophy classes in college, and so there's a part of me that loves kind of hearing about all these different theories and approaches to information and knowledge and power and all of that. And so I love that you base so much of your work and your business on this constructivist theories and ways of looking at the world. So I thought that was really cool.
Thanks.
And I didn't know initially that that's where your name came from either until I read your bio. And then I was like, oh,
Oh, it makes sense now. No, I thought it was just a really nifty name. Like,
I thought it was some kind of weird play on like
yeah.
construction, like constructing, but it makes sense. It totally makes sense. So I want to circle back to your travels because I love the stuff that you showed. You did an Iceland trip. Was that last year, I think, or the
Norway.
Norway? Was it Norway? Oh my gosh, sorry.
No.
Um, same general, somewhat kind of sort of part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up in America. I know they make fun of us for not knowing countries.
The landscape photos and the architecture, I feel like almost could be in Iceland, but it is a very different country. It's a very different country. I promise I'm aware of that. So my mistake, you were in Norway. I loved the photos I saw from that. And then you were able to hit a few, from what I remember, a few kind of really large beautiful buildings and get some great photos inside mostly, which I really love. They're on your website. Um, can you
Thanks.
talk a little bit about the travels? Because it seems to be a big part of your inspiration and maybe even part of where you want your business going. I don't know. Talk about
Oh
how.
yeah, I mean, I would love to be sent out to Norway more. I mean, after like pretty much 95% of the countries in this world stop banning us from visiting.
Once
Uh,
we're allowed out of our little cage, it'd be great, right?
yeah, so I'm really thankful that I made the decision to do that trip before any of this.
Definitely, definitely. So yeah, it seems like travel's been a big part of your gaining experience
Yeah.
and feeding this love of your architectural photography. Can you
Yeah,
tell about the travels you've done and how they played a role?
they've played a huge role, really. I'm glad you like asked me this question because you know, what drew me into architectural photography wasn't homes or residences. I didn't really think that that was kind of like where I would end up being right now. Like, I thought, oh, you know, I'm young and like I love architecture. I'm going to just travel the world and shoot like for Zaha Hadid or something, you know. Yeah, like that did not happen. I'm not saying it can't happen like in the future, but when I was starting, that's just not going to happen. Um, but yeah, it played a huge role because that was really where my passion was. That's what really got me into architecture. Just being able to travel and then visit beautiful architecture. And, you know, growing up in, so I grew up in Thousand Oaks, small city in Southern California. Like, you know, I grew up there from when I was 9 to 10. I know earlier I said Delaware. That was like when I was like baby. Um, yeah, so there wasn't a lot of architecture there, honestly. Like in America, I feel like we don't have like a huge drive to like make beautiful architecture. And so when I went to travel, that's when I really fell in love with it. I'm like, wow, this is like gorgeous. I love being in these spaces, exploring and walking around. So I mean, when I travel, that's kind of just like me revisiting, you know, why I even became a photographer.
Yeah.
Uh,
Was
so
there was there like one trip or one country that kind of sparked things for you or
I mean, Europe trip when I was really young, right? I mean, just even visiting classical stuff like the Louvre and
Mhm.
then just seeing how beautifully everything was constructed and how precise everything was. I really loved it. I mean, just like how Pei created that pyramid in the middle of all of this, it was just kind of eye-opening. I hadn't seen anything so beautiful. I was super sheltered. All I knew was studying and some films. But yeah, when I went to visit those places, it really sparked my imagination. And so I think that's really how it plays in. It's just me being able to be me and then shoot what I love. I mean, I think everyone as an artist should have some passion projects. So travel for me is really that.
Nice. Are you finding I know it's only been a few months, but are you finding any ways to kind of feed that a little bit while you're at home? That's been a big struggle for a lot of people that
It
love to
is.
travel is how do we travel without traveling?
Yeah, it's hard. What I have been doing is just going through my hard drives and then finding little nuggets here and there. And then it just makes me really sad because it's like, I can't do any of this. But at least I'm close to it. And like, that's what's great about photography is it brings you back to a certain place in time that you don't really have anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's my version of traveling, just opening up Photoshop.
Maybe you should start like planning itineraries.
Uh,
You can travel next. Oh, can you hear me?
yeah. You broke up for a brief second, but the itineraries, yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah. I don't know if that would be more fun or more sad. I guess it
I'd
kind
have
of
mixed
depends on your mood.
Yeah, I'd have mixed feelings.
um, so you've had kind of an interesting path with one of your clients, Airbnb, and I know we've talked about this before
But yeah.
because I'd been part of their marketplace photography system for like forever. They're kind of one of the ways that I learned early on about how to shoot interior spaces. And then I think you started working with them, I'm going to say a couple years ago, but you took a different path with them, and you do some really awesome properties for them now. Can you talk a little bit about what that path has been and how that process has been with them?
Yeah. So back in 2018, during the summer, Airbnb Plus launched. And so they were desperately in need of a lot of photographers. I think that they had a huge push to get a lot of listings up. And so they had hundreds of listings in each of these cities by the end of like the first big run. And it was really helpful for me because I did get to access a lot of spaces just being with Plus. And I got a shoot in a lot of light that I did not think would work. Like, I mean, yeah, no, I don't hesitate to say this because I mean, when I was first starting, I'm always thinking about light in the way of the natural light that I see when I went to travel. Like, I would not shoot midday because I knew the gorgeous soft light was around, like 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. and like very early morning. But for Airbnb Plus, they basically just set a schedule for you. It's like shoot when the hosts are available. And I'm like, what is going on? And they're like, shoot this many photos in 1 hour or 2 hours. And I'm like, I'm not used to this. I'm used to spending 1 whole hour to shoot one thing for commercial architecture. Like that's how I was trained. In residences, I'm still spending 45 minutes for one shot because you have to think about styling and lighting and your camera placement. So it definitely kind of got me out of a rigid like framework of thinking. And I think that was probably more helpful than anything because then I got to see how light kind of behaved during all times of day. And that's not something I would have done on my own. But I mean, financially speaking, honestly, it's a good amount of money. Like when you're doing a lot of listings, when you're first starting out. So I would encourage people who are starting to like take these opportunities. I know that there are people out there who are saying, oh, they're not paying that much, but it's kind of like, they're paying for the amount of time. They're also a business. They're not expecting you to do an architectural digest shoot for that money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think also, I think because do they still have Airbnb Plus or did they just switch over to Airbnb Lux?
No, they have Airbnb Plus still. So I mean, I don't want to say too much about like what's going on internally,
Oh,
but
no, that's fine.
yeah, because like coronavirus did kind of hit Airbnb hard, so they had to halt a lot of production. They haven't shut it down. They have laid off a lot of people. I think it's public information that they laid off like 25%, 30% of the workforce, and that's not including the contract work that was in the photo department.
Yeah, I know at least at the marketplace level, everything's been completely frozen since
Yeah.
mid to late March, I think.
Yeah.
And they still, I think I got an email recently that they're not even putting a date to when they're thinking that they're going to open it back up anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of follow the news, and it seems like Greg Greeley, the guy who headed the whole homes division, he just took off like this week.
Oh wow.
So he's getting replaced, and then I think the marketing person also left, like the director of marketing left, and then he's being replaced, or maybe like I don't know.
Yeah.
So a lot of transition is happening, but to go back to your original question about kind of like between Plus and where we are now with the pandemic. I worked a lot for Plus, and then after about a year or so, my manager just recommended me to one of his colleagues in Airbnb Lux, and they just saw my website and they just hired me, which is really amazing. I remember the first meeting with the art director, I prepared all these interview responses because I thought she was like intending on interviewing me for the job. And she's like, no, I'm just walking you through, like, this is an orientation. You're already hired. And I'm like, what?
That's great. Well, I think your work speaks for itself. So they made a good hire.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I guess what I was kind of getting at, you were talking about sort of the money's been pretty good for the work that it is and for the investment you have to put into it and stuff. But I think it's also good for viewers to be aware that there there are these different avenues. There's the general marketplace, the plus and the luxe. And so I think that also changes depending on which sort of track you're on with them. So I know for the marketplace, the pay is quite different, but I always recommend people, like, if you're able and you're just starting out, it's such good experience just to kind of get into a rhythm and learn how to execute a shoot quickly and still be able to deliver, even if it's not like interior design photos, to be able to deliver a full set for a listing and be able to do it quickly and get critique back from them. I know early on, for me at least, they were really helpful and vocal about, like, oh, can you adjust this? Can you adjust that? And that was how I learned a lot, like in the first year or so.
They never did that for me. Now I'm sad.
What's that?
They never really did that for me. Now I'm sad.
Well, I will say this was in 2011 and like nobody knew who they were. So I think that they were much more nitpicky about the photos they were having done.
Yeah.
But I was getting paid like nothing, but the feedback at that time was great. Now, for like the past 3-4 years, anytime I take any of their requests on, like there's no feedback. And it's either that I've gotten damn good and or I think they're just at a different volume. They're just big now. So they're probably not
gonna,
they're not picking everything apart quite as much.
Yeah. For Airbnb Luxe, I did get some feedback, which was nice. They do have very strict brand guidelines for how to shoot. And so the feedback was more just like, oh, can you get this kind of variety of shot for the next shoot, or, but yeah, I'm with you. I think that if you're first starting out and you're having trouble getting new clients, sometimes just saying that you're part of Airbnb's like Plus team or something, it can really help you get clients. It can, help build your portfolio to be able to get better clients. And you're not doing it for free, because I mean, you do hear about people starting out shooting for free, which I do not think is a good idea. Like maybe your first 3 shoots or 4 shoots, you could do that, because like no one's going to hire you if you don't have anything on your website. But
right. Yeah. I think as long as it's strategic. So like, and with Airbnb, if you're doing the marketplace or any of it really, I think as long as you know what you're looking to get from it, if you're taking on shoots that are not going to be paid, then they should be with people like, or locations that you want to shoot specifically. Like, no, I want to do this place. Or because you're very specifically looking to grow with that type of work. And with Airbnb, like at the marketplace, they still pay below the market rate, but you take it for what it is. It's work that drops in your lap, and you go through it quickly, and it is what it is. And so I think there's a good place for all of that, as long as you know why you're taking it on.
Yeah, and I mean, I see it not the same way a lot of photographers see it, because they like to say like, oh, well, they're undercutting the market. But let's be real. I mean, we're talking about a home rental market. If it's not Airbnb that they're using, they're just using their iPhone. Like there's no loss in business to the rest of the market, because I do think that, as photographers, we do need to be mindful that we're not hurting our industry in any way. So I just want to add that. Yeah.
Totally. And I think a lot of what makes a difference with that argument too is there's a place for the lower priced shoots, and there's a place for doing something for $100 or whatever. But as long as the expectations are aligned with that, like as long as your client's not expecting to have Architectural Digest photos for $100, then, it just needs to be aligned. And there's a place for beginners or entry level, or somebody who just needs a quick $100 here or there, as long as you're not giving 3 days of your time away for that shoot. So there's a lot to be said for that, just kind of walking into those situations with open eyes, but there's an opportunity for it. Of course, you wouldn't expect somebody who's been in it for years to be able to take on a new client and be like, oh, I can do it for $100. It's like, well,
I mean,
expectations to be set.
Have feel like if you're a few years in and you're not charging like what you're worth at that point, like I don't know. I feel like
There needs to be some sort of intervention, some sort
yeah,
of come to Jesus meeting that needs to happen where you raise your prices a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, it's so much about just kind of going into it with open eyes and knowing why you're taking on something that's
yeah,
outside your typical value, so to speak. You have to be getting
yeah.
value some other way.
And to kind of qualify, this whole thing about joining a place like Airbnb and maybe shooting for less than you're worth at first, like make sure you don't do it for too long because I do think that, it is difficult for you to communicate your prices to potential clients in the future when they're thinking, oh, well, you can do this for Airbnb for like say 240 for like an hour or like 320 for 2 hours or I don't know like how like their Airbnb Plus does pay a bit more, but it's still like you're not putting a lot of work in. But you're giving them something like 30 to 40 usable raw images to be able to composite on their own. And it's harder after a while when you're communicating to a client. It's like, well, then I'm going to charge you 240, 320 per photo, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So like, be a good business person and don't do that kind of stuff for too long because it will hold you back. But I mean, for me, it was great because it did kind of give me a platform to kind of rise into Airbnb Lux, which then gave me the ability to shoot awesome drone footage even.
Drone footage? Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know you shot drone too.
Yeah, I shoot drone. I've done a few drone videos. I've just not really been on top of my social media. I will post it soon. Like, yeah.
Nice. Nice. Cool. I can't wait to see that. Um, okay, so when you are arriving at a location, what is kind of your process? So do you have sort of a routine you go through as far as like how you approach a new property?
Uh, yeah, so I don't I know some photographers they have a routine, they show up on set and they're shooting. For me, I'm more methodical, I guess. I mean, it's more for my clients than for myself. I trust myself that I can go into a space and then come out with a great portfolio of shots for someone. But what I do is I scout a location with my client ahead of time. If it's a shoot that has 7 or more photos. If it's just like one room, then no one's going to spend their time to like scout out the location and then come up with all these selections for what we could professionally shoot. And so, there's a lot of discussion that happens before that on what we need to be documented. And so when I arrive, I already have a set schedule pretty much. I mean, there's a little wiggle room, but like a pretty set schedule based off of how I know the light's going to behave at any given time of day. So I think that's mainly my routine. Um, Other than that, I listen to some music on the way over. That always helps.
Are there so on the shoots that you have where you haven't scouted, do
Yeah.
you are there certain things that you look at first? Like if it's a property you haven't been to before, are you looking at the light? Are you looking at are you making a shot list in your mind? Are you like what sort of things are you looking at when you arrive?
For the scout shoots, you mean?
Well, I
Or
guess either when you do the walkthrough, when you do the scouting, the scouting session, or when you show up and you haven't scouted it and
okay.
it's a small shoot.
Well, when I haven't scouted it, it's mainly when it's a really small project. And instead, I'll have them send me cell phone photos or floor plans so that I can predict when the light will be nice. But for when I do have a scout in place, when I'm doing a scout, I'm not looking for lighting. I'm mainly just looking for composition because I want to make sure that my client walks away with stuff that will show exactly all the hard work that they put in. And so there will be a variety of overviews, vignettes, and details for them. Probably more overviews and vignettes. I don't have that much time to like go in and take photos of every single detail, but I'm just looking for composition because for lighting, that's always something that I can plan to create on my own, amplify using diffusers and reflectors and strobes. or just, work with the natural light that I can see going through the windows. But yeah, it's mainly just so I can get the composition down. What do I do to be able to find good compositions? I mean, that's kind of a tough question too, Natalia. I don't know what I'm thinking.
Well,
Honestly, when I walk into what?
I was going to say that how to find a good composition probably comes from, I think that's a pretty instinctual thing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's more just, something catches my eye. I mean, sometimes when no ideas are coming in, then I'm just shooting your general 1 point perspective until something comes. I think that's probably what I do. But when I'm scouting, I'm just shooting. And then when I come back to my desk, then I know, okay, this is when I really connected with something. And then, I'm able to come out with the scout photos and say, okay, here's my recommended list and here's pretty much everything. Because sometimes it's also just really helpful to have shot like a bunch of stuff that doesn't even work, because then when the client comes back to you, he's like, oh, did you try it from that angle? I took it with my cell phone and it looked great. It's like, yeah, here it is. It doesn't look that great. Like, it's easier to communicate with them.
That's true. So many times you have client be like, oh, but what about this? And you're like, well, you can try it, but.
Yeah, and so the scout's nice because you try it in real time and you show them, and then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, never mind. Let's not spend money on that one.
Okay, so last two questions to kind of wrap things up with you. What are your favorite kind of tools, gear? What sort of things do you like super duper rely on? Any apps, anything like that? And anything that's super inspiring that you might want to recommend right now?
Okay, so tools and apps. Apps, definitely weather.com or like AccuWeather. Check your weather before every shoot. And also Sun Tracker. It shows you where the sun's going to be at what angle any time of day. So yeah, I really think that, the light is really what makes a difference in a photo. Like, if I don't have good light, it's really hard to even come up with a good photo, even with like great composition. It's what makes a photo real, and it's what makes something that we can connect with when we see it and just think, wow, this is so beautiful. This can't be a rendering. This is like, the real thing, and it's gorgeous. So it's the light for me. I don't know. I also want to say that I'm quite in love with content aware fill in Photoshop.
Oh, okay.
So pretty much anything that has AI in it with Photoshop, I really love. I mean, it's just fun to tinker around, like lasso something and then use content aware fill or use a spot heal, and you can change between content aware and spot fill and proximity match, and all of them have their own little behaviors and averaging algorithms that kind of replace what you need replaced. And so yesterday I was working on some photo from Norway because I have to submit these to just kind of like an online showcase thing. And it took me like 10 minutes and I got rid of all these reflections. And then you could see every tree leaf I mean, it's really amazing.
I have not played around a lot with the content aware fill, but now I want to.
Do it. I created a shortcut too. It's F2. So like I'll just lasso and then F2 and then it's just like gone.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm play around with that now.
You're welcome, everyone. I already know that. And you're spending hours getting rid of like a reflection on a handheld.
Any Photoshop or Lightroom tip is always welcome. So yeah, I love that. Anything that you're loving that's like super inspiring right now?
Yeah, I always go back to movies. I mean, like, yeah, there are other photographers doing what we're doing, and I'm sure it's great to like study them. I just don't choose to do that. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. It's more just like a thing where it's like I get paranoid that maybe I'm going to become like them or something. And so I just try not to do that. And then, I mean, I'll keep up with you guys on like social media. Like, I'll like it. I mean, I believe in supporting the community, but for my own inspiration, I'll look at movies. Yeah. Like recently, I saw The New Pope, I know it's kind of like one of those art house pretentious European like things on HBO, but I really love the cinematography.
I was
And
just gonna say, sometimes those kind of art house movies have the best visuals. I mean, you just look
yeah,
at how things are visually set up, and it's just, yeah, no, I get that. I'm actually a big believer in not, I don't know about a lot of like the big photographers typically. I don't like to. I fall too easily into comparing myself to other photographers, and that's just a bad trap. So I'm kind of, probably for different reasons, but I'm kind of in the same boat as far as like I don't actually super closely keep up with a lot of other photographers because I feel like it gets into my head a little too much. So I love the idea of taking inspiration from other areas and other arts and other places.
yeah, it's I think how it's how like you can kind of create your own style because
Mhm.
you're able to kind of synthesize a lot of different information across different disciplines. I mean, I don't think that we should pigeonhole ourselves into even one style. So it's really helpful to see a lot of different artwork. So I'll look at paintings too. I mean the constructivist stuff. I love looking at Laszlo Moholy-Nagy whenever I can, and Picasso was a big one before I discovered Laszlo, and then yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah, and that's how you find like innovative ways of doing what you do too, is you look at influences outside of your field and then that's how you get new perspectives. So no, good call. Good call. Okay, last one. Um, so starting out with architecture or interiors is can be kind of daunting to a lot of people. So what's sort of your biggest piece of advice for other, especially females of color out there, but really for almost anybody that's starting out,
yeah,
that wants to succeed?
yeah. I think the best advice I can give, given like where we are in society today in America, is like realize that discrimination can exist. And I'm sure, just based off of who's contacted me back from cold emails, I can see that, there's a certain demographic and certain gender that tends to email me back and see my work more and hire me. But at the same time, it's going to be counterproductive if you dwell on it. And you have to kind of empathize and understand that, yeah, it's human nature. There are going to be certain demographics that certain people will resonate with more and they'll feel more comfortable. And you can see from how we've handled a pandemic, there's like a human nature component to just fearing the unknown. And so you know you kind of just have to accept that's the way things work, but don't let it hold you back. Just do your best work, and I guarantee that there will be people out there who will hire you. People have hired me, and I think about it this way too. I worked at a wealth management firm. I was doing IT work. I was a database admin. And so, when I was first going into this firm, I didn't have that job. I was working as a data and reporting specialist, meaning like I was configuring reports and, choosing the color of a pie graph. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it was kind of, I mean, the thing that helped me get through that period of my life was just like, I love photography. I don't know if I want to be in this office all the time, but if I'm going to be in an office, I'm going to do a damn good job like at whatever I'm doing. And if I have an idea and I can be proactive and then come up with a solution for a problem that the men of at my workplace couldn't solve. I mean, no one's going to argue if a program isn't running properly or is running properly. Like you can't. That's what I love about math, that it's so objective. Like you're either right or you're wrong. Like it's logic, and so in that office space, I did a lot, and I think that if I could have done that there, then I can do it in something else. And if you are your own photographer, you get to be your own boss. And if there is an asshole that is treating you improperly, you just don't work with them again. I mean, thankfully, like I've not come across that. So, I mean, if there is someone who ends up being sexist, they're probably not contacting you then. And then it's, yeah, like it's all good.
Yeah. there's a lot of power in being able to uh, get kind of a negative response or a non too positive response from somebody, and being able to just kind of brush it off and keep going
Yeah.
and move forward anyway, and kind of show them later like how much you're kicking ass in the world.
Yeah. Just don't get into that mindset where you're, not hearing back and you're wondering to yourself, like, oh, is it something else? Like, don't worry about that. If it is, it's whatever. There are people, just, push through that, and then just constantly reflect on your own work and see, maybe there's some area for improvement. I mean, during quarantine, I definitely went through my portfolio again and looked at some stuff I shot 2 years ago and took issue with it. I mean, I was like, wow, when I shot that, I thought it was the best thing in my portfolio. I can see 10 reasons why that is not the case.
And it just means you've improved so much. It just means that you've been growing a lot professionally.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like,
To look at it. I like to look at stuff from early on, and after I cringe and I think, oh my God, that's horrible, then I'm like, but look at where I am today.
yeah. And so, I mean, I think it's going to be better for you and your business if you constantly try to improve yourself instead of dwelling on what other people may or may not think.
Yeah, the rejections are part of the process for sure.
Yeah, you got to have definitely a thick skin for this.
Yeah, yeah. And I almost think for any sort of creative business, there's just going to be a lot of people who either don't put value to what you do, or they just don't like the style of how you do it, or whatever. But yeah, it's part of doing it. It's just part of it, and you got to find your own people. They're there.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking all that time to chat with us. I loved the conversation. I think you brought so many good stuff out for people, and a lot of good tips and insights. And that's it. I'm going to show all the links for people to be able to follow you and see your work.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad to kind of share as much as I can. I mean, I also haven't been doing this for like decades. And so, like, take what I say with a grain of salt, obviously. Like, I'm just trying to share what I know so far.
Yeah, that's okay. We all work in our own ways, but it's always reassuring to see how other people work, because so often I feel like we think we're kind of our own little island, and it's so nice to see that other people are out there doing stuff and probably relating to
Yeah.
some of your experiences. So no, it definitely helps.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jean. We will see you online on Facebook and Instagram and all that. And thanks again for taking the time. Take care of yourself.
No problem. Yeah. Stay safe, Natalia. And I don't know, we'll catch up another time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.